Deep in the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees grew tall and twisted and the air was thick with magic, there lived a woman named Moratiwa. She was known throughout the land as the Enchantress, a woman of extraordinary power and beauty. Some said she was as old as the forest itself, that she had been born from the roots of the oldest tree. Others claimed she had been human once, but had traded her soul for magic. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: Moratiwa was not to be trifled with. Her home was a hidden cottage, nestled between the roots of a massive oak tree. The cottage was small, but filled with wonders, potions that could heal or harm, mirrors that showed the future, and books filled with spells that could bend the will of anyone who dared cross her. But Moratiwa's greatest power lay in her ability to enchant the mind. With a word, she could make a man see the world as she wished him to see it, make him believe that he was in love, or that he was in danger, or that he was lost in a dream. Moratiwa lived alone, but she was never lonely. The forest itself was her companion. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, hear the whispers of the wind as it passed through the leaves. But for all her power, Moratiwa was not invulnerable. She knew that there were forces in the world greater than even her magic, and she was careful not to draw their attention. One day, as the sun set over the forest, casting long shadows across the ground, Moratiwa felt a disturbance in the air. It was subtle, just a ripple in the magic that surrounded her, but she knew that something was coming. She stood at the edge of her clearing, her eyes scanning the trees, and waited. It wasn't long before she saw him, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in the armor of a warrior. His face was stern, and his eyes were dark with purpose. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat, and as he stepped into the clearing, he did not falter, even when he saw her standing there. Moratiwa watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. She could feel the power radiating from him, not magic, but something just as dangerous. This was no ordinary man. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with authority. The man stopped a few feet away from her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "My name is Tao," he said, his voice low and steady. "I have come to seek your aid." Moratiwa raised an eyebrow. "Aid? And why should I help you, warrior?" Tao's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Moratiwa thought he might draw his sword. But then he spoke again, his tone more measured. "There is a darkness spreading across the land," he said. "A shadow that consumes everything in its path. Villages have been destroyed, entire families lost. The king has sent me to find the source of this darkness, and to put an end to it. But I cannot do it alone. I need your magic." Moratiwa studied him for a long moment, her mind racing. She had heard whispers of this darkness, rumors carried on the wind. But she had not paid them much mind. The forest was her world, and she had no interest in the affairs of men. But now, standing before this warrior, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. "And what makes you think I would help you?" she asked, her voice apart. Tao met her gaze without flinching. "Because if you don't, the darkness will come for you too. It will consume this forest, your home, your power. You will not be able to hide from it." Moratiwa's eyes flashed, and for a moment the air around her seemed to shimmer with energy. But then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Very well, warrior. I will help you. But know this, I do not do anything for free. There will be a price." Tao nodded, as if he had expected this. "Name your price, Enchantress." Moratiwa stepped closer to him, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "When this is done, you will belong to me. Body and soul. You will be mine to command, mine to use as I see fit." For the first time, Tao hesitated. He had not expected this. But he had come too far to turn back now. He had seen the destruction caused by the darkness, and he knew that without Moratiwa's help, he would fail. And so, he nodded. Agreed, he said, his voice firm. Moratiwa smiled again, and this time, it was a smile of triumph. Good. Then let us begin. The journey that followed was not an easy one. The darkness that Tao had spoken of was unlike anything Moratiwa had ever encountered. It twisted the land, turning green fields into barren wastelands, and it corrupted the minds of those who crossed its path, filling them with rage and madness. But Moratiwa was no ordinary enchantress. She had spent centuries mastering her craft, and she was not afraid to face the darkness head-on. She used her magic to shield herself and Tao from its influence, weaving spells of protection and illusion that kept them hidden from its gaze. The source of the darkness was a cursed artifact, a stone that had been buried deep within the earth for millennia. It had been unearthed by a greedy king, who had sought to harness its power for himself. But the stone had not been meant for mortal hands, and it had unleashed a force that the king could not control. Now, it was up to Moratiwa and Tao to destroy it before it consumed the entire world. When they finally reached the stone, it was guarded by a creature of pure darkness, a beast that seemed to be made of shadows and nightmares. It was larger than anything Moratiwa had ever seen, with eyes that glowed like embers and teeth as sharp as knives. But Moratiwa was not afraid. She had faced worse in her time. With a wave of her hand, she summoned a storm of fire and lightning, directing it at the beast. The creature roared in pain, its form flickering and shifting as it tried to escape the onslaught. But Moratiwa was relentless. She poured all of her power into the attack, her eyes blazing with determination. Moratiwa approached the stone cautiously, her senses on high alert. She could feel the power radiating from it, dark and malevolent. But she was not afraid. She had faced the darkness, and she had won. With a single, powerful incantation, she shattered the stone into 1,000 pieces. The darkness that had plagued the land began to dissipate, the sky clearing, and the air growing lighter. The curse had been broken. Tao watched in awe as the land around them began to heal, the once barren wastelands slowly returning to life. He turned to Moratiwa, his expression one of gratitude and admiration. Tao stiffened, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his sword. But he knew that it was no use. He had made a deal with Moratiwa, and she was not one to be crossed. Moratiwa stepped closer to him, her hand gently resting on his chest. "Do not worry, warrior," she said softly. "You will find that serving me is not such a terrible fate. After all, you have seen what I am capable of. And now, you will be a part of it." And with that, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered the words of a spell. Tao's eyes fluttered closed as the magic took hold, and when he opened them again, he was no longer the man he had been. He was bound to Moratiwa, body and soul, just as she had promised. And so, the Enchantress and her warrior companion returned to the forest, where they would remain for many years to come. Moratiwa continued to weave her magic, protecting the land from those who would seek to harm it, while Tao stood by her side, her loyal servant and protector. But there were whispers among the people, stories of a warrior who had been ensnared by a powerful enchantress, of a man who had traded his freedom for the promise of power. And though no one dared to challenge Moratiwa, the stories persisted, growing more elaborate with each telling. But Moratiwa did not care for the whispers of men. She had her power, and she had her warrior. And in the end, that was all that mattered.